We want to remind everyone we have social media exclusive content like our 2-minute drill as well as other video content. To find that, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for more. And we are kicking off episode number 3 here on the Let's Be Frank video podcast. I am Jason Duhe, and I will be shortly joined by head coach Frank Monaco. But tonight's episode, we're going to have LHSAA Week 2 recaps, Week 3 previews. We're going to go ahead and talk some about some local college football games. Tulane in their big matchup against Ole Miss and LSU having just beaten Grambling. Saints talk. We'll also have special guests, national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman, and in the Let's Be Frank segment, we'll have Coach talking about the importance of offensive linemen. But before we do, we want to go ahead and thank our sponsor, Accardo and Dufresne Law Firm, your go-to River Parish lawyers, for being the title sponsor of the Let's Be Frank podcast. Go ahead and bring on Coach. Coach, another episode, another week. I know you coach both baseball and football at the high school ranks. Why is football different in terms of preparation and the way you have to get ready for the season and the grind that is football season as opposed to baseball?
It's a great question, Jason. The football just requires so much film study because, every play, the defense is in something different and they try to stop you. It's a cat and mouse type of scenario. You have to look at personnel and the matchups and things of that nature. So in football, you never really feel like you're prepared. Whereas baseball, it's only one way to feel a ground ball correctly. You teach them how to hit and how to pitch, and you do the situation, and it's repetitive things. You keep going over. They all are, but football is just totally different because of all the things that involved with special teams, playing offense, playing defense, and whether you platoons. There's a lot more to the program. And the intensity is just totally different, too, because it is a contact sport. So that kind of separates the two sports right there. But baseball is very, very cerebral. It's kind of laid back because, in between pitches and stuff like that, whereas football is very, very intense. And because of the fact that it is a contact sport, that makes it totally different.
The term you always use, Coach, is it's not a contact sport, it's a collision sport. And I've always loved that. I've used that a bunch because that's one of your phrases that has always stuck with me.
They always say that dancing is a contact sport.
Right, that's the follow-up line, Coach. I want to go into that one if you didn't. But let's go ahead and take a look at some Week 2 recaps from the LHSAA season. In our first matchup, we had Carr defeating Scotlandville 45-0. Tough second week for Scotlandville, but Carr is just a well-oiled machine.
No question. I think that Scotlandville was outmanned, and Carr's got so many people in the field that can play. So, I look for them to be in the state finals, regardless of what happens with this injunction or not.
And in our next matchup, we had Newman taking on Riverside. Newman won 33-7 in that matchup. We knew the talent that Newman had, and being a little bit bigger of a school that might play into it. Riverside had a rough go. We'll see what happens moving forward, but both still very good football teams.
Yeah, I think the Riverside does not have the numbers that Newman had, and there's a big difference between 2A and 1A. Coach Rousseau does the best he can with that, but Newman looks like they have a pretty good football team this year too. Even though after the Manning kid, it looks like they can run the football and they're very well balanced. So look for them to make some noise in 2A.
In our next game, St. Charles defeated Lutcher 16-14. Yet another game that came down to the wire between these two teams. Both won the state title a year ago, and it took a field goal as time expired to win this one for the Comets.
Heck of an offensive drive on the last drive. The ball could have gone either way right there. Lutcher was actually completed a couple of long passes, but Rivers again. St. Charles was very, very resilient, and they held their own, and they overcame a bunch of penalties to get there. And they had a little sophomore soccer kicker that came in there. He actually had missed a PAT earlier in the game and came back, and he just drove that field goal like it was no issue whatsoever. And a big win on the road.
In our next matchup, we had Ruston defeating Jesuit 35-7. We knew it'd be a tough one for Jesuit with that big physical Ruston team. Proved to be a bit much this week.
Yeah, I think, Jesuit's still a very, very young football team. They're playing a couple of ninth graders, a number of sophomores, very young, and Ruston just outmanned them. And they lost a tough opener themselves. So I think they came down here with a little revenge in mind. And I think they're a team to contend with, because they were a team that made it all the way last year and didn't win it. But look for them to be there again.
Destrehan knocked off John Errett 24-7 in their matchup. We know the depth that Destrehan has, and they just continue to build and roll that snowball down the hill on their attempt to win a second state title in a row.
Yeah, I think John Errett came there as a big underdog, and it proved out that way. Destrehan is just, right now they're just too much. Their program is too far along for John Errett until they get their swagger back like they used to do in the old days.
In our next matchup, we had Brother Martin taking on St. Paul's. Brother Martin won 23-10 in that game. Brother Martin, we talked on the phone, Coach, coming off that state title loss against John Curtis, trying to move forward with this positive energy that they have after having a 5-5 regular season, but having won those 4 straight games to get to a state title last year.
You're right. They're just a well-coached football team, and St. Paul's is too. That was a good battle there, and St. Paul's is very good on defense. So I think Brother Martin's quarterback is he's been there before, so he's got experience and he makes them go. So look for them to contend in the Catholic League again.
Warren Easton knocked off Catholic in what was a shocking score, 49-26. We know the athleticism both these teams have. Warren Easton not able to make it to the playoffs this season, but a very impressive showing from a very athletic group of young men.
I don't even know if the game was that close. It looks like Warren Easton was really, they were rolling. Catholic didn't stop them, and, Catholic just has so many players. That was a big surprise. Not that the fact that Warren Easton won, but the separation between the two teams, because that game was not really a competitive game.
In the next matchup, we had Rummel taking on Duhe, and the Raiders won 20-17. A tight matchup yet again, similar to a year ago, and this time Rummel was able to pull off the win a second straight time.
Duhe has a quarterback that's an LSU guy, and he's really got a fine arm, and they're going to win a lot of football games. They will rank them number 1 in 3A. So I think that was a big win for Rummel, especially coming down from 10 down, and with the 2 quarterbacks that they have. And I think, it was a swing pass that actually went 60 yards for a touchdown at the end. But that's a huge, huge win for Rummel and Coach Nick Monica.
In our last recap, we have Holy Cross taking on De La Salle. Holy Cross won 49-27, getting revenge after last season's defeat. Holy Cross seems to be a team on a mission with 18 returning starters and a lot of talent.
No question. I think they got a lot more talent than De La Salle put on the field. But De La Salle fought, and I knew Coach Grant probably had him in position, but I don't think they had the horses that Holy Cross has, and they have a lot of big play guys. And they might have 4 receivers that can play for anybody. So they're going to be hard to contend with if they can stay healthy.
Absolutely. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our preview section. Coach, a lot of big games in week 3. We start out with Newman and Benton. Last year, it came down to the wire. Newman had to make a comeback, a 54-52 type game. Benton comes in 1-1, Newman 2-0, and a lot of talent on both sides of the field.
Yeah, Coach Stewart and Coach Reynolds Moore are very, very good friends, and that's how this whole thing created at the Manning camp, because they're real good buddies and they set up this game. And but both of them do an excellent job, and Newman has to go on the road. This is a Thursday night game, a little bit different venue, because that's hard. Sometimes you lose a day of practice when you play, if you're not allowed to play on Sunday. So that could be a real good matchup again.
And expect it, a lot of talent in that secondary for Newman, new quarterback for this Benton team. We'll see how that plays out. In our next matchup, we have Brother Martin taking on St. Thomas More. Last year it was St. Thomas More winning 30-16. Of course, they ended up winning a state title. Talented quarterback, young man named Sam Altman, passed for 33 touchdowns just a year ago. Another talented running back. And Brother Martin has to step up defensively if they're going to have a chance in this game.
Well, I think the key here is not only the defense, the key is their offense must keep St. Thomas More off the field the best they can, because they can score. So you're going to have to score with them. You might have to get some breaks in this ball game, because St. Thomas More, they run a fast-paced offense, and they like to put up the points no matter what, and they're not going to stop scoring. If it's 50-60, they're not going to stop scoring. So Brother Martin has to slow down them by slowing down their own offense a little bit, and just kind of get 3 or 4 yards and move those chains and keep their offense off the field.
Coach, that's kind of how you made your living in high school, was to keep defenses on the field. How much does that play into especially the high school game with the 12-minute clock in particular?
That's a great question, Jason. It's important that if you have a good defense, and my philosophy was always build your defense first, and you can find ways to move the football. But other than your quarterback, we took the best players and put them on defense, because if you can't stop anybody, you have no chance of winning games. You can't depend on outscoring people. Some people do that. Some people do that because it looks sexy to score a bunch of points. But the bottom line is who scores the most points at the end of the game, what's on the scoreboard. So I think you build your defense first. And then all of a sudden you play to your defense. Like sometimes you might not go for it. You punt it on fourth down, play your defense, then play the field position. Some of the best games that we've won, we ran only maybe 50 snaps. But you won big because you played on a short field with great defense and great special teams. So I think that was always my philosophy, is just to make sure you can stop somebody first. Because if you can't stop anybody, every play call must be a perfect call, and that doesn't happen.
Thanks, Coach. And looking at our next matchup, we have Destrehan taking on East Ascension. It was Destrehan winning 42-2 a year ago. East Ascension comes in 0-2, but they played two very good football teams. They lost to West Monroe 34-20. Nothing to hang your head at with a team like that. But Destrehan has so much talent, and it seems like a lot to overcome.
I agree. If EA can come up with some kind of offense, this could be an upset. If they come up with some kind of offense, from what I understand, they got the biggest football team in the state. They're huge. They're big. I know they're physical. They're strong, but they just haven't been able to get much offense going. Now, again, the competition they've played has been really, really good. Some of the best in the state. But listen, don't be surprised now if they give Destrehan everything they want to.
Absolutely, could be another tight matchup for East Ascension. We know how they are, as you mentioned, a big physical ball club, and they could make some noise in that ball game. In our next matchup, we have Carr taking on Warren Easton, two extremely talented ball clubs. Last year was a lopsided affair, and Carr won 67-20 in that matchup. But we know the ability that both teams have in this ball game. Warren Easton has a very talented a group of running backs, 350 yards on the ground last week. And if that is the case, playing on the field the entire game, if your car is going to be rough to be able to come back offensively and rev up those juices after sitting cold on the sideline.
I think, Warren Easton is going to play with a chip on their shoulder because they have no playoffs to play for. So I think that they're going to say, hey, I'm putting everything in this ball game right here because this is it. We can declare ourselves the city champion, state champion, whatever we want to after this ball game. I don't know what the over and under for this game would be, but it should be a really exciting game. They'll have a lot of athletes on the field. I mean, in that game, all cheerleaders can run 4-4. So you're going to see a lot of speed on that field.
Coach, we like to do our betting segment at the end of the show, but if there is somebody making high school lines, take the over. Make sure to take the over in this matchup. In our next game, we have Holy Cross taking on Chalmette. Holy Cross won 51-13. I said it so many times. 18 starters returning for Holy Cross. A plethora of talent on the field. You have Cross Johnson, Kobe Young, and Derek Johnson on the perimeter. Coach, it's going to be tough for Chalmette to come into this ball game and slow down this attack offensively of Holy Cross.
Chalmette batted down this effort by Lakeshore last week in the end zone. They were excited about that win, and they should be. They're 2-0, and they're playing as hard as they possibly can. But this is an old traditional rivalry because Holy Cross used to be located right down the street from Chalmette, up the street rather. So this could be it's going to be close for a little while. But I agree with you. Holy Cross just has too much talent on the field and the speed that they will possess that Chalmette does not have.
To Chalmette's credit, they do return 11 guys who started in some capacity last year on defense. But in a matchup like this, we know the athletes that Holy Cross has on the perimeter. When you were coaching at St. Charles or anywhere else at your laundry list of places that you've been, how do you game plan for a team that is so dominant, so physical on the perimeter and out-athletes you to this extent?
Well, one thing you have to do, first of all, is that you don't try to give up the big play. And I mean, just make them grind it out. Maybe they might make a mistake. Maybe they might have a penalty or something like that. But I think, the bend but don't break attitude is very, very prevalent in any defense. Just don't give up that big play because they count. Big plays. I hear coaches say this all the time. We only gave up 2 big plays, but they count. So don't give up. Don't give up those big plays. Even if you have to give up a little bit, make them grind it out. If you take a lot of chances, I mean, you can stone what we call sell the form and sell out and blitz a lot. But then all of a sudden, the old adage, you live by the sword, die by the sword. That's true. Because all it takes if you blitz them out is split one gap and you're gone, and there's nobody to catch them. So I always believe that the bend but don't break, just be sound, and at the end of in the fourth quarter, be close by the fourth quarter to give yourself a chance to win the game.
Only 2 big plays, like you mentioned, but if only we had mulligans in football,
Yeah.
So it's not the game of golf, right?
Amen.
Jesuit taking on Lafayette Christian. Last year it was a shockingly tight ball game. Lafayette Christian only won by 3 points. It was a 28-25 ball game. Juwan Johnson is so talented, and this defense for Lafayette Christian is big, physical, and hard-nosed. This young Jesuit team is going to have to find a way to keep their offense on the field, make this game as short as possible, and they're going to have to play some solid defense.
Yeah, LCA's they're averaging 50-something points a game. I mean, they're lighting up the scoreboard, and that's the way they like to play. But the only chance that Jesuit has is that Coach Manali knows this. He's really good at controlling the line of scrimmage, is running the football right at him. And he's really good about putting an extra lineman in the backfield and running counters and things like that, lead plays. And that's what he has to do. 3 or 4 yards a shot, move the chain, maybe even take a couple shots on 4th down, because he's going to have to keep them off the field. And that's got to be his game plan, because if he tries to run with them and play that type of game and fast-paced offense, it's going to be a long, long night for him. So I look for him to really slow this game down, snap the ball with about 5 seconds, maybe 3 seconds left on the clock, and they really shrink it and give them a limited amount of possessions. That's huge. Most high school games are about 12 possessions, 10 to 12 possessions. He needs to shrink that to about 8.
Coach, there's a lot of youth on that ball club for Jesuit. The Blue Jays have a lot of inexperience on both sides. And on top of that, they're taking that long road trip down to Lafayette. Have you ever had a similar situation where you've had an extremely young ball club on that long road trip? And what's the main thing you have to worry about when taking that kind of approach to this type of game?
Well, it's like everything. Coaches say every game has a different mentality and every different intensity, every game. But once your culture is developed, the kids fall in the line and they understand that. They know where they're supposed to be at a certain time. They know on a bus trip that, okay, you're not going to have cell phones. We're going to watch some tape and we're going to occupy your time. We might stop and stretch our legs at a rest area or something like that. Meanwhile, we're going to have a little football meet just to keep football in front of them. And so the coach will break up and stuff like that. But they'll be regimented. It's not just I'm going to get on the bus, I'll eat potato chips all the way over there, and we're going to listen to music and that whole deal. It's going to be very, very concentrated, very intense, and I think with a great focus. But you don't change that, whether it's you're playing the number 1 team in the state or you're playing the last team in the state. No matter what, they have no wins. You don't change that culture and your game day procedure.
Rummel travels to Sean, what we know to be a big rivalry matchup. Rummel has bested them quite a bit recently, but we've seen the amount of change in that Shaw program since Coach Tierney has been there. What do you expect in this ball game?
Well, they're a totally different team than they were last year. They're more mature. They're big. They have some playmakers now. And on the offense, you got a great running back. The quarterback is really, really tough, a real thick kid. They're able to throw the ball. They have a transfer that came in from Jesuit, a big, tall kid, wide receiver. So they have some playmakers. And on defense, they're not really small. On the flip side of it, Rummel's looking at this game after the big win last week. They're trying to get some momentum created they have to put some pieces together because they've had a series of injuries already. And look like they've lost 3 guys for the year already. So you have to put some of those guys together and make some of those ninth graders grow up on the road. So and Shaw's been looking for this game for a long, long time. So this could be quite a war.
In our next matchup, St. Aug takes on Zachary. They're going to head down to Baton Rouge. Zachary, new quarterback, a few new pieces. Didn't love how they came out in week 1. Of course, they had that bye week in week 2. Probably could have used that game before playing this talented St. Aug team. I think a big piece of St. Aug is going to have to be a guy who our guest later, Sam Spiegelman, probably knows, Jakeem Stewart, a young physical defensive lineman for St. Aug. If you can put pressure on a new quarterback in Zachary, that might favor your ball club.
Yeah. Can you ever remember a time when St. Aug didn't have players? I mean, they have a number of players. Zachary was off last week. I don't know if that helps them. They had a lot of time to concentrate on St. Aug and work and break down that film. But on the flip side of it, I never did like open dates. I think you lose your sharpness, you lose intensity, and sometimes your timing is not there. So we'll see how this shakes out. But the two of the better programs in the entire state, and there'll be a lot of athletes on that field.
In our last matchup, we have Turlings Catholic traveling to St. Charles Catholic. Last year, it was a back-and-forth ball game. A little bit of controversy from what I've been told in that matchup. But we know that Turlings Catholic has a high-powered offense. They're a bigger school than St. Charles, which means they're going to have those numbers. But we know St. Charles is a school that has 120 kids in their football program this year and has a solid defense. So this might be one of those immovable object meets an unstoppable force.
Well, that quarterback for Turlings is back, and he's very talented. And I saw him last year, and that game was a lot closer. I thought that we actually got the better part of them, but they didn't show on the scoreboard. We had a couple unfortunate things happen with penalties, but it's going to be a quality game. It gave St. Charles their first loss last year. And St. Charles they're playing well, and they have a good football team. But it's going to take even a better effort this week. They have to find a way to move the ball and keep their Turlings offense off the field because they're really, really good. They have a couple guys that totally new on their football team that they didn't have last year, but they're certainly still talented.
And I'll do it for the high school segment. We'll go ahead and move on to college football talk. In our first matchup, we had Tulane taking a tough loss to Ole Miss, 37-20. Game much closer than the score. Unfortunately, it just didn't roll the Green Waves' way. Having Pratt out definitely impacted the game. But I thought Tulane had a very strong effort, very strong showing. Nothing to hang your head out. Just things didn't go your way in this matchup.
Well, without Michael Pratt, I mean, this kid's probably on a lot of people's All-American lists. It's, somewhere on that line, he's a very accurate guy. But what they missed was his running ability. The fact that he can, and not that he's going to run a lot of option plays or things like that, but he can pull the ball down if receivers were covered and extend plays. He's very, very good at that. And it was a game-time decision. He had a knee injury, and they went with Horton. And actually played well. And Tulane was in position with 5 minutes to go in the game. They had a big fourth down call. And he got out of bounds. They reviewed it. Tulane thought they had made the first down. They were down by 7 and a chance to tie it. And it didn't happen. But at the end, they had a fumble, picked up a fumble to the quarterback, but that was a jump touchdown. They also almost had a 56-yard field goal. But just a heck of a battle. Tulane's defense is really good. And they held the running back to less than 60 yards. And that was a tremendous feat in itself because Ole Miss's offensive line was just tremendously big. And the quarterback for Ole Miss is good. So they're going to be a contender in the SEC. And, they got a good scheme. But I give Tulane a lot of credit. Of course, I hate to say it's a moral victory because those things don't get you anything. But hopefully that Pratt can be back. They did a lot of good things in that game. Their special teams were excellent and in that ball game. And with Pratt there, who knows what would have happened.
They take on Southern Miss next week, a foe that they are familiar with. Lost that matchup last season, I should say. This felt like the outlier last season, coming off of a loss to Ole Miss. You got to assume that this Tulane team isn't to come back focused regardless of what happened because of last year's matchup.
And another thing, Coach Hall, the head coach over there, was the offensive coordinator for Coach Fritz 2 years ago. So, I mean, that's going to add an extra incentive for Tulane to play well. They still can have a good season. And, they still haven't started conference play yet. So this could be a big game, but a good test on the road after playing 2 at home. And let's just hope that Pratt is healthy enough to play in this game.
Yeah, and hopefully moving forward, he'll be able to go because we know how much he adds to that offense for Tulane, especially after an impressive Week 1 win that they had over USA. LSU will take on Mississippi State this upcoming week. They beat Grambling 72-10, but a lot of the story was the lack of defense in that first half. a lot of running between the tackles, and, of course, depth weight on. I think LSU is going to have – a lot of fans have this air about them that we've beaten them so many times over the past 30 years that this is a cakewalk. I think this is a very tricky game for LSU. Your defense hasn't proven their validity. Your offense can put up points, but you can't rely on that when you have those annoying cowbells ringing in your ear every single play when you're playing at Starfield.
I agree. I agree totally, because this got all the markings of a trap game. Because I think the first SEC game is always real competitive, no matter who's playing. I think they get ready for that. They say this is the SEC, and the way it looks, they're not going to play next year. And so this rivalry is going to be something. It's a smaller stadium, but a very, very compact stadium, as you talked about. And more importantly, LSU defense. I don't know if they can stop the Grambling marching band. I mean, I was disappointed the way they ran up the field in the first quarter. And this is a program that has 63 scholarships compared to your 85 plus all your walk-ons. So I was a little surprised at that, but I agree with you. Daniels, he's a force, and as I said before, I really like to see them play fast. I think they're a lot better football team when they play fast. Unfortunately, it makes that defense stay on the field more.
Absolutely, something to keep an eye out on. And in our next segment, it will be talking some New Orleans Saints. Coach, they pulled off the win, a tight win at that, 16-15 over the Titans. But in the NFL, every win comes at a premium. I thought they passed the ball well at moments, especially down the stretch when it mattered. I thought the team looked good other than a fumble on the opening kickoff. Like to pull your hair out as a Saints fan if you're watching that. But for the most part, I thought it was a great team effort, and you can't put a price on a win in the NFL.
Oh, yeah, you're exactly right. You cherish a win in the NFL. They're all getting paid. I mean, whenever you beat anybody, it doesn't matter who's across their chest. That's big. I was very, very impressed with one. Olave as a receiver is excellent. Shaheed, he's an excellent receiver. Michael Thomas caught some big balls in the middle. I love Carr's delivery. It's very, very smooth. He gets the ball out of his hand. He looks like he's an intense player and the leader in the huddle. And their defense, what more can you say about their defense? Their secondary, with the 3 picks was something, but their secondary were all over their guys. And, I mean, you're going to get calls. You're going to get some interference calls because everybody's coverage is tight. You know what I mean? And you can call that whenever you want to. It's just so it's the discretion of the officials itself on how tight they want to call a game. But I was very, very pleased with their persistence. I thought Coach Carmichael called an excellent game, mixing and matching the things, and doing it without Kamara. And that's a big part of their game. And without the first round draft choices running back. So when they get those guys back, I think they'll even be better on offense.
And without those guys against last year's number 1 rush defense. So quite an impressive deal from the Saints. Next week, they take on the Carolina Panthers. Panthers took a loss in week 1. Inexperienced quarterback. Your defense has to be ready to be aggressive and attack in this matchup.
Yeah. You got to watch that, though, because it's always a tough game. Carolina, they got the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, and I know he wants to show what he can do, and he can scramble. And that's the thing that, you got to watch that. When you get a scrambling quarterback, your coverages change because you can't play what they call 2-man. You can't play a lot of just pure man all the time because somebody has to watch him because he can scramble and really hurt you and extend plays. So, but it should be a lot of fun, and you would love to see him go 2-0. But to win on the road in the NFL is awfully hard.
Absolutely, no doubt. And that'll do it for our first segment. When we come back from the break, we'll have special guest Sam Spiegelman from On3 National Recruiting Analyst. But before we go to break, we want to go ahead and thank Accardo and Dufresne Law Firms. Samuel Accardo Jr. and Henri P. Dufresne, your go-to River Parish lawyers. The River Parishes is our home, and serving our communities is our passion. We'll be right back. Samuel Accardo Jr. and Henri P. Dufresne, your go-to River Parish lawyers. Experience, tenacity, and results. Sammy Accardo and Henri Dufresne provide comprehensive legal services in personal injury, hurricane claims, business litigation, successions, and estate planning. Our trial experience, know-how, and commitment to protect and serve our clients is unparalleled. We provide complete real estate, title, and escrow services through our affiliate, State Title LLC. The River Parishes is our home, and serving our communities is our passion. Based out of Gramercy, Louisiana, LSR produces Southern cane, pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. LSR utilizes the latest innovations in technology, as well as ensuring the growth and stability of Louisiana's sugarcane farmers by integrating more than 800 growers in the industry's economic structure. Southern cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets.
Since 1972, Riverlands Insurance Services has been dedicated to securing the best insurance products and services available to protect you, your family, your assets, and your business. Our goal has been to establish a strong relationship and partnership between you, the insurance company, and our agency, creating a circle of success that prepares for disasters before they actually happen.
In our second segment, we have special guest On3 national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman. Sam, thank you so much for joining us once again after last season. And I just had a question about how difficult is it to look at the amount of athletes and talent in the high school level and evaluate to build these relationships, because college is so easy. All these games are on television, but high school is a completely different ball game. You have Huddle, but how difficult is it to build these relationships and to find these players?
Yeah, I think coach can tell you when you're on the recruiting side of things, is you might have a bunch of guys on your board early on, and each season, each different part of the season, the recruiting calendar is 52 weeks out of the year. The guys can pop on the radar at any time, so the relationships are really important with coaches, because they might tell you about a kid as a sophomore, but that kid might not really start finding his stride, maybe be a D1 ready college level prospect until their senior year. Everyone, I think coach can attest to this, everyone goes on their own timeline. There is no right timeline. There is no wrong timeline. Everyone goes at their own beat. You might be a college ready prospect as a sophomore or as a senior, or you might be a late bloomer. So it's important. That's why relationships are so important with kids, with their families, with their coaches, high school coaches, people that are on the staff, people that are paying attention and want to give the spotlight to kids, because you just never know when their time in the sun is going to be.
Sam, I have a question, because everybody asks this, and especially being a former college coach also. And, when you read the paper, they said this guy's a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star recruit. Okay. How do they come about, these so-called stars, and who makes these rankings?
Yeah, well, at On3, we have a fantastic director of rankings, and I've been on that side before in the past at different jobs. And for a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, if you have any stars, it means that someone deems you, evaluated you, whether it's in person or on tape, and they said this guy can play at the next level, whether it's FBS, FCS, Division 1, 2, 3. They said it. 3 stars is supposed to signify Power 5, which at this point, Tulane is getting Power 5 level guys because of the way that they recruit and evaluate talent. It doesn't matter where you're going. It's saying that you're a Power 5 grade and that you could be drafted to play in the NFL one day. When you start getting into the 4 stars, you're talking about the top, 2% in the entire country, the top 200, 250, 300. And for the 5 stars, you're talking about the best 32 players in the country. The 5-star prospect at the high school level is supposed to represent someone that in 3, 4, 5, whenever their time is going to be a first-round pick. They have the first-round pedigree, whether that's, obviously, senior eval is the most important part of it, but what you do in the camp setting, what you do in different all-star game settings, what you do, obviously, during live evaluations. So it's usually over a 2 or 3 or sometimes 4-year stretch.
Right. Sam, let's go, if you don't mind, who are some of the top recruits in the state of Louisiana? Because a long time ago I was told, and I don't know if this holds up, that Louisiana is one of the top 5 states in the whole country that produces D1 football players.
Yeah, and Coach, my favorite thing about being in the boot is that we were the smallest state, right? But we have the highest per capita when it comes to producing the guys that play on Saturdays and really Sundays. And one of my favorite things about being on three is they got all the numbers to back that number up. The number one player in the state for this year is over at Acadiana. I'm sure you'll see him in a couple of weeks, Coach, when they play Curtis. But Don McKinley is a 5-star defensive tackle. For Acadiana, he plays a little bit of the 3 technique, a little bit as a 4. He has him as a stand-up rusher sometimes, a guy that's constantly battling in the trenches, taking on 2 and 3 blockers at a time, but also has that second gear to be a pass rusher. He's about 6'5.5", almost 6'6", 275 pounds before his senior season. This year he ran track and field. I think he clocked a 4.540 at 260 pounds. He's got a tremendous wingspan. He's also, so far I've seen him a couple of times as a senior during spring practices and again for his week 1 performance before he committed to A&M. And he certainly has all the tools that if he doesn't scratch the surface this year, in 2 or 3 years, we might be talking about a future first-round pick.
Oh, wow. Coach, what about some of the top guys in the metro area and the river parishes that, they don't have to be top, but guys that you think will be recruitable?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one of my favorites has been right in your backyard at Destrehan, Tut Cobbins, Collage Cobbins. He's kind of a hybrid linebacker, edge, defensive end for Destrehan, played a huge role really starting as a sophomore for Coach Scott in the Destrehan defense. I think he was among the leading tacklers in the state as a sophomore, just kind of see ball, get ball. Last year, they used him really as a pass rusher and obviously setting the edge in the run game. But this year, they have him with his hand in the dirt a little bit, rushing off the edge, kind of the same way that LSU fans love Harold Perkins. Obviously, Collage Cobbins is one of the big pieces in Brian Kelly's 2024 class. He's one of my favorite prospects, and he's already off to a great senior season. He had a great game against John Ehret last week in prime time. Sticking in the metro area over at Edna Carr, one of my favorite defensive players is linebacker Taji Butler. He was really hurt last year as a junior during Carr's great season, but when he was on the field, he was a great playmaker. And coach, as as the middle linebacker, you're kind of the heart and soul of that defense. Coach Bryce Brown only has 4 seniors on that Carr roster. Taji is one of them. He's committed to Georgia Tech. He's really just having an outstanding season as the heart and soul of that Carr defense, which is really talented and really young. So they need a leader like Taji to lead them, and he's doing a great job so far. I can't wait to see them in a few weeks.
Sam, have you seen the defensive end from Lutcher High School? He's a junior, and I know he's got 2 offers from Tulane and Vanderbilt. Have you seen him?
I have not yet.
Mm-hmm. He's excellent. He's a tall, rangy guy. And again, he's a junior. I saw him play Friday night, and I think St. Charles had to do a lot of things just to make sure. First of all, they had to run away from him. And that always helps, But what about when you acquire all this information, Coach, in terms of that? Because when I was at Tulane, I had a sports writer that would come in, and he would look at my recruiting list, and he would not tell anyone where he got it. That was confidential. The head coach didn't know that he was acquiring it from me because I had a lot of Louisiana schools. And do you do that? Do any of the colleges subscribe to your service to find out where these recruits are?
Yeah, I think rankings plays a bigger part than it should when it comes to what college coaches think, because in a lot of ways they're kind of they're playing the game with the media because they're always out for representing their school to make whatever their university looks like. They're recruiting some of the top players in the country. And a lot of times they want to fight you on evaluations. They want to sometimes, if they're iffy on a guy, if they like a guy and they want a second or third or fourth opinion, it's really just, getting all your ducks in a row when it comes to getting an evaluation, coach, because it's so subjective. There are some things that we can look at and say, your mom or dad played sports in high school, college, in the professional ranks. You could play 3, 4, 5, varsity sports and be really great at that. You could run this time and jump this high, but sometimes you're still just a little bit iffy on some people. And like we said at the top, some people just kind of, it all comes together at different points. So, I think college coaches, they love rankings to affirm what they've maybe seen on tape, maybe something that they've seen in a camp or an in-game setting. And then sometimes the rankings either justify that or just hearing it from someone like me who's at a lot of games or on the sidelines a good chunk of my life, I guess, just to get another opinion of someone, just to feel even better about it.
I agree with you, Sam. Because recruiting is not exact science, and that's why coaches now are really trying hard. And I know 2, 3 staff, they will not sign the kid unless he goes to their camp, so they can actually test him and work him out and see what kind of feet he has and what kind of attitude he has and the character and things like that. Because it's not exact science. The NFL has no restrictions on how many visits a kid has or stuff like that. And NCAA, you only get one official visit, the whole deal. And the NFL still makes mistakes, because sometimes you recruit a guy and he can't play dead, but sometimes you look at this guy, he might be maybe a 3-star guy, but he ends up being one of your better players. Do you see that often?
All the time. Like I said, everyone peaks at different times, and sometimes you're waiting for opportunity. There's so many different parts of the puzzle each time. You could have someone that maybe only, had to sit behind 2 or 3 great players in front of them, only has senior tape. So, you might, when we're talking about 4 and 5-star players, which, are not to say anything is wrong with the evaluation process, but we might have been able to see them 10 or 12 times before they graduated. There are some kids that maybe had to wait for their opportunity, didn't get to play until their senior year. And while it might be great that they got recruited, and that's really what the important thing is at the end of the day, we know that people do care about rankings. They care about where they finish in that regard. And sometimes, maybe only seeing them once or twice, you're a little bit hesitant. It's the same way that college coaches are. They might want a 3rd or 4th opinion. And as us on this side, if you're giving evaluations or you want to give an endorsement on a player, you might want to see them a few extra times to feel a little bit more confident in what you're going to say about them. And I think the same goes for 3 stars, 4 stars. Again, it's a positive grade. It's you're about sorting between maybe an 89 grade and a 90, or a 79 and an 80. At the end of the day, it says you can play at the next level, and that's really what the bottom line is.
A lot of guys now, Sam, I've been through the whole thing. We had this long evaluation sheet. You had to put everything down that the kid did and stuff like that. But a lot of people go to this highlight tape. And I never did like that procedure, but the highlight tape can get you interest. But I tell coaches all the time, I've never seen a bad highlight tape. When they show the NFL draft, they're always showing the guy that's best and stuff like that. But they don't show the whole game when he might have been stoned or something like that. Highlight tapes, a lot of guys are doing that nowadays, and they think that's the answer, and they see one highlight tape. What you can't tell on the highlight tape is the quality of competition. I mean, there's a kid that I know of that's getting a lot of recognition in New Orleans as a running back. Well, his competition is not very good. So he's going to look great on tape, and he's going to look like maybe a 5-star recruit unless he goes to somebody's camp and they really have tested that guy. Do you see that?
100%, Coach. I think there's so much to gain from a live evaluation. I think that's probably what I've learned the most over the years is, if someone is highly ranked, you should go to their game and you should walk away saying, I know who that player is. You shouldn't have to figure it out. You don't even have to check the jersey on the roster. You should already know who it is if you're watching blindly. And a lot of times I don't look at the roster until maybe when I get home and I'm watching the tape and I'm lining up names because you want to get an objective view of the game. But going to a live evaluation, I don't care what position it is. I think obviously quarterback first and foremost, you want to see what they do every single play. You want to see how they act in the huddle. You want to see how their demeanor is on the sidelines, how they interact with their coaches and teammates. But there's so many positions where that remains the same. You want to see what these players are like in all these adverse and non-adverse situations. Coach, you've been in so many different situations on the sidelines. You might think that the most talented player might also be your leader, but many times that's not the case. And I think if you're a college coach, more so than the evaluation side, you want to know that if you're recruiting a player, you want to know every part of their character, every part of their demeanor, and that's in good times and also bad.
Exactly, Coach. And because you never can tell about a kid. I always like them personally to see a kid either play a game or go to practice. I thought that was huge to see a game in that environment. Watch his practice habits. See if he was lazy. You can tell by his body language whether he was a leader or whether the kid was lazy. Because, college football is rough. And as I tell all kids, once you sign that scholarship, they actually own you. So, I mean, if they tell you to be at a study hall, if they tell you to be at practice at a certain time, weightlifting, they actually own you. And you need, because they have that scholarship they hold over your head. So not if you're pretty lazy, you're not going to make it in the 4-year school at all. Coach, switching to that, I mean, quick story. We had Jake DeLome on, in fact, last year. He was one of our guests, and he played at a small school. And it was hard to convince my head coach at the time that this guy could be a pretty good player. Well, he ended up, playing the Super Bowl one year. But I mean, I also recruited some guys that they couldn't play dead either. So you never know about that. But coach, what about I know that they got a couple guys in River Parish. I saw the guy from Shaw, defensive end that Tulane has. I don't know his name. He looks like he's got good potential because he's tall and rangy, and he's a senior. And but I don't see D1 yet in that kid. St. Charles Catholic has a linebacker. He's about 6'1" guy that can really run. By the name of Kyle Cannon. I can see him playing college ball somewhere. I don't know if he's D1 because they're all looking for guys that that can leap tall buildings. I don't know if he can do that, but he's a heck of a football player. Anybody else in the River Parish that we should look at?
Off the top of my head, there's a lot of young guys over at that Destrehan program. I hate to keep ringing the bell for them, but they are locked and loaded for the next couple of years, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They got a young sophomore receiver by the name of Jabari Mack, who I think is going to be one of those top 100, top 200 players in the country.
Right.
Coach, I don't know. I'm sure you do remember Johnny Thiel from his days at Curtis and East St. John, and his son is playing wide receiver for Destrehan. And they also got one of the fastest players in the state, Philip Wright. I think he's one of those All-Americans on the track and field and one of those potential Olympic sprinters down the road. And they got so they really restocked at the receiving corps. So I know that there's a couple of guys over at Wildcat Stadium over to keep an eye on. Right.
How about Coach? How about Curtis? I understand they have a few players that know a little bit about football.
Oh boy. Well, I know that they're do-it-all athlete. We saw him in the state championship in December. I don't know how many players you can remember who caught a touchdown and had an interception in a state championship game, and the way that Curtis beat Brother Martin emphatically in that last game of December. Michael Turner his recruitment took off pretty rapidly. It was funny talking to him after the game. He said, Tulane has been talking to me a little bit, Texas Tech. And then after that title game, you kind of trust the process, and his recruitment took off. I think he is the fastest player in the state for this year, and he's committed to LSU. And now on the offensive side of the ball, we know what Curtis does on offense. I'm excited to see them in a couple of weeks, but they're running back. Jason Gabriel Jr., another speedy guy in that split back veer offense. He's going to really, I think Curtis is going to have another great year and compete for the Catholic League Championship, and that's going to be a big reason why having so much speed in multiple positions this year.
Right, and there's them, and I think you're right. I think that I saw him play that game, and that game wasn't even close in the Superdome, and the matchup there. I mean, Coach Bondi's did a phenomenal job just to get his team that far, but it also had a little bit advantage of the draw in the bracket, something like that. But Coach, listen, we really appreciate this. You're so knowledgeable about what you're doing in your craft, and I think it's an excellent venue that you're doing, and people can go to you because that recruiting process is for coaches. It's not exact science. And I do know what you're going through with that, but I don't know if they still have it. It's called Collegiate Sports Data. And that was something that we had every year that we applied to, and it was a paid service, and we used to get our information from them. Are they still around?
Yeah, they're still a part of it. They kind of connect themselves through various camps. At my old stomping grounds when I was at Rivals and we did the Rivals camps, they were a part of it. They tried to record every single 40. We did a whole combine as part of our camp series, and like you said, colleges across the country subscribe to that and pay for that because that's that essential data. Like I said, there's a lot of ways to tell if someone's going to be a 3 or 4 or 5-star prospect, and a lot of it is that same thing that some colleges won't take kids unless they camp there and they can get that data. That data and analytics is such a huge part of our game, our sport at every single level, from high school, college, and the NFL to other sports like baseball and basketball. They're all into analytics just as much. And that data is so telling because it'll tell not only their impact on Saturdays, but whether it's going to translate on Sundays. It can tell you when kids are going to grow, how fast they're going to get. It's out of this world technology. And that's just a cool part of the age in sports that we're in.
Sam, you bring up a good point too. I mean, now people are recruiting nationally. They're not just doing regional stuff. And people like for instance, Tulane, they have to be national because the academic requirements. So they have to spread out and get more people on their recruiting board because you never know who can get into school and things like that. But one thing I always found, and we used to talk about this often, is that the out-of-state guys like to fly into an airport and recruit around the airport, so they're not too far from it. So they're not going to go to the Bayou or something like that unless somebody's told them or some service that they subscribe to told them that's where they go. I don't know if you find that to be the case, but I did when I was recruiting.
Yeah, I've heard quite a few of those kind of stories across the time. But you know what it is, that's why I can always appreciate that's why we live in a world with social media. I'll say this: I was just on the road in Shreveport over the weekends, and then on my way back to New Orleans, and I had one coach that became a high school coach, went back to the college ranks, said, he follows all these different people you never knew that he would be following. And he says, because coach, like you said, you might be the diamond in the rough that you have to drive a little bit out of the way. But sometimes when you go into small communities, small towns, you get elite players. I mean, one of my favorite players from last year's class was Tackett Curtis, who signed with USC. And Manny is one of the smallest towns I've ever driven. You can drive through Manny in 10 minutes and end up in Natchitoches. And he is one of the best players. And that's the case in Louisiana. It's a big part of East Texas and different parts of the Gulf Coast here. And just because you have to drive a little bit further into the sticks a little bit doesn't mean that there's not good food and not good football somewhere to be found.
Sam, I don't know if this holds water, of how accurate a statement this might be, but the years that I recruited, I did not recruit California, but of the states that I did go into, I've been to Florida and Texas and Mississippi, but the state I found that the best players were in Texas. The only question there, did those guys peak out? Because they were at their best in high school. The coaching there, the facilities in Texas, the number of players that you have in Texas, I mean, it's unbelievable. So we actually thought that we can go into Texas and get a kid that was not actually a blue chip guy, but he was ranked maybe in your vernacular, maybe a 3, and he would be a good player for us at Tulane at the time. What's your opinion on what you think might be one of the better? I know Ohio ranks in there, Florida ranks in there, but what's your opinion on maybe one of the better states?
No, I think you hit it right in the head, Coach. What Texas is just a supersized maybe 4 times the size of Louisiana in terms of what the top level talent. And we're talking, Louisiana might go toe to toe with any state in the country in terms of, percentage of NFL players per capita. But when you go to Texas, I mean, you have East Texas, West Texas, the north part of the state, the south part of the state. And then obviously there's also Central Texas. It's just so many different metroplexes inside the state. Not only are there great players within, the giant state of Texas, but there is a quantity. Not only is it fertile for Texas and A&M and TCU, Houston, SMU, so on and so forth, but so many schools like LSU, like Tulane, like USC, like Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, you name it, can go into Texas, and there's enough really good players that they can stock up. Like you said, Coach, Tulane still does it. They go into Dallas and Houston all the time, right, and get commitments from 3-star players. And sometimes there's only like you said, there might be 3 stars, but there's so many. 3-star means a Power 5 caliber player that you can go in and get, and there's just so many. It's so rich in talent. I do think in my time there, I am a little bit biased, but it's so much great talent to choose from for so many universities.
Then you don't know, because I go to those large schools and they have a whole new senior class from last year, because some of those schools are gigantic. You go to Plano, and I went to one school, coach, that gave me 13 prospects, 13 on one team. I said, that was unbelievable. No, last but not least, because I will take up all your time. But I worked with Larry Smith at one time, and he had a pretty good formula. He always liked to go out and he said, listen, sign big safeties because they become linebackers. And he said, sign big linebackers, they become outside backers. Sign guys that were big linebackers, now put your hand on the ground. And he never did like to sign an offensive lineman. He said, I want to sign defensive lineman, and then we're going to move them over. I think that's a great philosophy. And he said, take as many tight ends as you can, because they become offensive linemen and they become offensive linemen, defensive linemen and offensive linemen. And that philosophy always stuck with me. And I said that was a great philosophy that he had. And naturally, he's passed, but I don't know if anyone else does that.
I love it, Coach. I love the idea of, because, when you play defensive tackle, the success is when you play low to the ground. That sounds like the right recipe for interior offensive linemen. And when you come to some of the best offensive tackles, especially nowadays in 2023, what are we talking about? We're talking about wingspan. We're talking about length and height. You're talking about weight that you want to add to you later on. And we want to add the frame when you get to college or put you in a nutrition and strength and conditioning program. So we don't want you tipping the scales at over 300 pounds before you even get to college. I want that former tight end that might be maybe a former basketball player who's got light, nimble feet, can move laterally and backward and kick slide as well as a tight end probably would. And we want to add that weight and teach in the position, because Coach, offensive tackle, offensive line is really hard. I love that formula. I still think it applies. And I think I think also big running backs also make pretty good linebackers too.
Yeah, amen. One of the best players we've ever had at Tulane was a kid by the name of Lester Lavalade, and he was a tailback, but he was a phenomenal athlete, the tailback. But Coach, listen, this is great talking to you. The Saints offensive tackle, Coach, poor left tackle for the Saints, we need to pray for him. So I think he threw more no-hitters than Nolan Ryan. You know what I mean? So, but Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It was really informative. Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely, Coach. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
We want to once again thank National Recruiting Specialist Sam Spiegelman for joining us. And you can follow him on Instagram at Sam Spiegelman _. On Twitter, you can follow him at Sam Spiegs. And you can also follow On3 at On3 Recruits. We'd also like to thank LSR for sponsoring the Let's Be Frank podcast. LSR produces Southern Cane, pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. Southern Cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets. Samuel Accardo Jr. and Henri P. Dufresne, your go-to River Parish lawyers. Experience, tenacity, and results. Sammy Accardo and Henri Dufresne provide comprehensive legal services in personal injury, hurricane claims, business litigation, successions, and estate planning. Our trial experience, know-how, and commitment to protect and serve our clients is unparalleled. We provide complete real estate, title, and escrow services through our affiliate, State Title LLC. The River Parishes is our home, and serving our communities is our passion. Based out of Gramercy, Louisiana, LSR produces Southern Cane, pure cane sugar, which is only grown, refined, and packaged in Louisiana. LSR utilizes the latest innovations in technology, as well as ensuring the growth and stability of Louisiana's sugarcane farmers by integrating more than 800 growers in the industry's economic structure. Southern Cane is available in your local Associated Grocers and Rouse's supermarkets.
Since 1972, Riverlands Insurance Services has been dedicated to securing the best insurance products and services available to protect you, your family, your assets, and your business. Our goal has been to establish a strong relationship and partnership between you, the insurance company, and our agency, creating a circle of success that prepares for disasters before they actually happen.
And we are back on Varsity Sports Now. This is the Let's Be Frank video podcast, and we'd like to thank Riverlands Insurance for being our sponsor. So we want to go ahead and bring on head coach Frank Monica in our Let's Be Frank segment. Coach, in this segment, we are going to be talking about unsung heroes, offensive line, and offensive line coaches.
Oh, yes. One of my favorite topics to talk about, Jason, because, offensive linemen have been the favorite of most head coaches. They love their offensive line because they have no egos. They're playing offensive line. They don't get their name called on a PA system. Nobody knows who they are. They don't have fingerprints. You know what I mean? So they're really, really unselfish people, and they need to be talked about. You're dealing with people there that probably not the least athletic people on your football team. And they have all the rules on the defense, and the defense has all the advantage. They can use their hands. They can do a lot of things where offensive linemen can't. They can't grab, and they have to use technique. And sometimes the technique is not proper. They must have a lot of strength to stop them, but yet the movement of their feet is really, really hard. So it's awfully difficult to be an offensive lineman. The other part of that is that they have to know their assignments. They must be very, very cerebral. They must know what they're doing, because if the left tackle changes his block, the right tackle has to change his block also. So they all must be coordinated. Those 5 guys must be coordinated as one, because all it takes is one guy, one mistake, and the whole offensive line gets the blame for it. But it might be one guy, but the tight end is part of that sometimes if you use one, or the H-back or something like that. But those guys are, one, they're out athleted, if there's such a term, and they're not as good as an athlete, and that's why they're playing offensive line. Some of them are retreads. Some of them were taken over from the defensive side because they couldn't play defense, and they moved them over to the offense because they're maybe not fast enough or not big enough or something like that. But they can get by with technique, and they can get by with knowing the ability. And the only advantage they have, they know the snap count and they know the play. That's the only advantage that they have on anybody else. But most of them do not have an ego. Offensive line coaches are a very, very special breed. All the ones I've ever worked, all they want to do is work with the offensive line. They don't care about calling plays. They don't care about formation. They just want you to run the football, because they don't want their offensive line to be showing up with being bad pass protectors also. So if you ask them all, would you rather run or pass? They all would say, hey, run the football. And let's get this game, because I want my guys to come off the ball and be more physical. And there's a lot more to it. Offensive linemen and coaches are like a cult. And I mean, they're really close to one another. They don't care about what else goes on. Just give me my offensive lineman and my technique. And there's a lot of different blocking schemes with offensive linemen. Some are zone oriented. Some are what they call a gap control, or what they call pin and pull. Example, I watched the Detroit Lions play the other night, and they just beat Kansas City with the offensive line. And they did a lot of things that I haven't seen in the NFL as much. They do a lot of pin and pull. In other words, almost every play, they had at least 2 people pulling. If it wasn't a guard and tackle, what they called a counter trade, or it might have been a guard and a tight end, but they had a lot of pulling. I was really impressed with that, because I've not seen that kind of scheme in the NFL as much. They do a little bit of it, but not as much. But so some of my very special people I've ever coached have been offensive linemen. They're very loyal. They work extremely hard. They get no credit, and they're probably the most drilled team an aspect of segment of any team, because they have to be on the field before everybody, or they stay afterwards to work on technique or pass blocking or something like that. And remember, they're going to get superior athletes, especially in the NFL level. You saw that with the Saints the other day. The left tackle was struggling with pass protection. The old kick step, he wasn't doing his kick step, and when he did, they beat him inside. So he's going to learn that with time. But just remember this: Bud Wilkinson, for the old Oklahoma coach, said it best. He said, "When the offensive line does not block, all backs look alike." So for my segment today, hats off to the offensive line. But a bad offensive line coach is not going to last very long. But a good one, they're priceless.
Thank you, Coach. And I got to ask a follow-up question. So you mentioned how important that these offensive linemen are. How difficult have you found it, to have seen you do this a lot in your time in high school? How difficult is it to convince a defensive lineman to convert to offensive line?
Oh, I'm telling you, it's very hard. You got to sit down, and I mean, you get the crying towel out, because somebody told him that he's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. So play defense, son, and they all want to play defense. He asked them all. They all came in and playing defense. They want to be a linebacker. They want to be something, but they don't have the feet. They don't have the ability. They're too small. They'll get overrun. But it's hard to convince them. And sometimes you have to sit down with mom and dad and say, or the kid just might leave the team. They feel their ego. They trip over their ego. Said, listen, I just tell them there's no glory in sitting on the bench. The most important thing, you want to be a part of the team. And how can you help the team the best? When they come in and they say, Coach, wherever you need me, that's what you want to hear from an athlete. Wherever you need me, play me, whatever's best for the team. And because sometimes that might happen the 4th or 5th game of the season. because of an injury or something like that, or maybe you might have to make a kid go two ways. And that's the way to approach it too. Say, listen, for right now, we'd like to work in two different positions. Now, what we always did in the spring, we did that. We gave a team, a player, an offensive position and a defensive position. So just in case you got a catastrophic moment, we can make that change maybe in the third quarter of a big game. And he had at least a little background of the terminology. But the whole package to be a good offensive lineman, that's why I've always believed in the platoon system, because I can teach a guy more rather than playing two sides of the ball.
Was it the Barracudas and the Piranhas?
Okay,
there we go. So, Coach, you can't say I didn't learn anything from you, right?
Exactly. We had the fish and we had the snakes. You had the water moccasins too. So on the other side, and the cobras. So we had a little bit of everything. You sound like the Audubon Park Zoo. Okay.
All right, in our next segment, we have Blitz the Ball, Coach, and we have a great question for Coach today. Coach, what is the importance of having districts with the power rating system in place?
Well, what the districts do, and there have been a lot of talk about doing away with districts, but the caveat here is that a lot of coaches want a district because they can't find 10 games on their own. And the more you win and you pick up the phone, it's hard to find 10 high school games, 10 people that want to play you. So by having a district, at least you have a base there of maybe 5, maybe 6 games in district, and then you have to go out and find 4 or maybe 3. So that's the advantage. Even though the district, there's no revelry in winning the district anymore, you do get a bid to go into the playoffs. But right now, the way the split is, you get in the playoffs anyway. So that's not a big thing. But the big advantage of being in a district is just exactly that, is that the fact that you get a schedule made, even though a lot of these districts are extremely, extremely weak, and you look around the state, we have maybe 1 or 2 good teams in a district, and that's about it. The rest of them are really, really not very good football team. And this is what happens when you go to schedule. Because the better teams are in the playoffs, and the other teams, the also-rans, are not. So they've already scheduled one another. They schedule one another. What they don't realize by doing that, they have not helped themselves out. It's better to play better competition for the power ranking, and we have a great power ranking system in Louisiana. It's envied by many other states. It's really, really good. I think that's a story for another day on how it works. You get to 10 points for a win, and you get additional points for their wins and stuff, and especially more points if you play up in class. So that's what the power ranking. So you are rewarded for playing a good schedule, and that's what that's all about, the power ranking. But it's a big mistake if you don't schedule real good games outside of your district.
Coach, I think you bring up a great point about how some districts are loaded. We know about the Catholic League, but let me run this one by you. 4-4A, you have Lafayette Christian, you have St. Thomas More, you have Turlings Catholic, and you have Westgate. That's in one district. That's 4 teams that could all compete for a state title sitting in one district. And that's not even talking about the Catholic League. So I agree with you. I think the way the system is built to sustain an equal playing field when it comes to the teams that you play and the schedule that you have built, whether it's by schedule or by design.
That's rare case there, Jason, that you talked about in that district. The rest of them, you look around, they have a lot of slappies and that are not very good football teams.
All right, and we'll go ahead and go to our last segment. Coach, we have our lock of the week. Coach, this is unprecedented territory. We're both 2-0, and of course, I don't have any wood to knock on, so I'll probably blow this game miserably. But who do you have this week in your lock of the week?
Okay, the lock of the week, I'm going to go with Florida, and I think the line is like 7.5 now. And Florida's playing at home. I really think they're a better football team than they've showed before. And Tennessee, even though I like Joe Milton, he's a heck of a talent. So I'm going to go with Florida because I think that SEC game is a big matchup there.
Good call, Coach. And I'm going to go with Kansas State -4.5 over Missouri. I'm not truly sold on Missouri. I think Kansas State is one of the premier teams in the Big 12. I think they have a lot going for them under their system, and that's just kind of the program that Kansas State is. So I'm going to take Kansas State in that matchup, and that'll do it for episode 3. So let's go ahead and take a look at our social medias before we go ahead and get out of here. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So at Facebook, it's the Let's Be Frank Video Podcast. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, it's the LBF Podcast. You can also listen to us on Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify. So that'll do it for us. Coach, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, guys, listen, just let's remember in your prayers of the victims of 9/11, and just make sure that you go to the church of your choice.
Thank you, Coach. And don't forget, we do have some social media exclusive segments, so please make sure you follow us on those to tune into those. So that'll do it for us. And make sure to join us again next week, Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. So,
Coach Tim Detillier is our guest speaker next week.
All right, so that'll do it here. So for Coach Monica, for Jason Duhe, remember, let's lay ball into a lay, let the good times roll.